Yes, ma'am. Visible, ma'am. Your PPT is visible, ma'am.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to be ready. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Hello.
Yeah.
Sir. Narayan, sir. Sir. Narayan, sir. Sir. Narayan, sir.
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ?
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಿದೆ ಸರ್. ನಮಸ್ತೆ ಸರ್. ಸರ್ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಸರ್.
ಅಯ್ಯೋ ಬಟ್ ಜನದಿಂದ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ. 49 ಜನ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಸರ್ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ 10 ನೀವು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡಿ ಸರ್. ಅವ್ರು ಜಾಯಿನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾರೆ.
ಓಕೆ, ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನಿಂಗ್. We will start. I am ready. Shalini madam, can we start?
Yes, sir.
I am asking Shalini madam.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I am ready.
Shalini.
I am ready, Hari.
Okay, right.
Madam always ready, sir.
Good morning. It's my habit 10 minutes before the scheduled time I log on. 10 minutes is a buffer time. I keep it for everything else.
Okay, we will start.
Sure.
A warm welcome to all the participants and our distinguished resource person for today's session. It is an honor to introduce Professor Shalini Aras. It's a matter of great pride for us that Professor Shalini served our department for over 4 decades, earning immense popularity and distinction across university campus. 1 minute. On a personal note, I'm deeply privileged to be one of her Dr. Shalini Aras is an eminent information scientist. She holds a master's degree in library and information science and a postgraduate diploma in computer science. She earned her PhD studying a cognitive aspects of information retrieval system. She started her academic career at the University of Mysore in 1976, specializing in informatics. She is a pioneer of India's open access digital library and ETD movements. In 1999, she launched the renowned Vidyanidhi Digital Library project with funding from DSIR and the Ford Foundation. Professor Shalini Aras served as a visiting professor at ISI Bangalore, a Fulbright visiting faculty at Virginia Tech, and an adjunct faculty at IIITB. She has led major research projects funded by Microsoft, Google, NSF, and the Indo-US Science and Technology Forum. She has also served as a consultant to UNESCO. As an educational leader, she founded International School of Information Management, ISIM, at University of Mysore and the Myra School of Business in Mysore. She has published over 200 research papers in leading journals. Her notable awards include Mortensen Distinguished Lecture, University of Illinois in 2010, Emerald Research Fund Award in 2007, NDLTD Adobe Leadership Award in 2004, and Fulbright Scholar between 2000 and 2001. Professor Shalini Aras serves as on the board of Guru and is a trustee of the Sharda Ranganathan Endowment for Library Science. As associate of Information Matters, she curated the InfoFire conversation series featuring luminaries like Windsurf and N.R. Narayanamurthy. Recently, in 2026, she completed 2 Royal Academy of Engineering UK projects on digital twins for urban digital public infrastructures. We extend a hearty welcome to Professor Shalini Aras and all our participants. Over to Professor Shalini Aras.
Thank you, Hari. It's a privilege to be able to reach out to all of you people. Hari tells me that there are about 17 odd participants. I wish it were a in-person meeting because it has its own advantages. Of course, we also know the advantages of online meetings. So here we are on a virtual session. So I think today, in a way, it has become so ubiquitous to talk about AI. Sometimes, we feel that we shouldn't be talking about AI at all. Okay, that's the, saturation point that we have reached. But however, anyway, the theme, it's something like that. You can't help to talk about something that is so, I would say, such a force that is transforming or revolutionizing our lives. So AI is here with us. We can only consider, debate, and learn also from different perspectives on AI, and especially AI in academia. I would say there is AI, as far as we are concerned, more about AI in teaching and research. So what I want to talk about or focus about in this morning session is how we can use AI, or we have transitioned from using AI as a tool to our thought partner. That's the theme, and how we can integrate AI in our teaching and research. But let me also tell you, I'm not going to be talking about all the ways in which you can use AI for your teaching or research purposes. I'm going to be focusing more on how we can use AI, particularly ChatGPT, for the Socratic method of teaching. I hope many of you know what is Socratic method and are familiar with that. See, we all, as teachers or any professional, etc., we always have this problem of time crunch, right? So I'm asked to give a talk here or somewhere else, and then, I know that they would have asked me about 2 months back or 2 days back or whatever is the time. Still, we push it towards the end. So, time crunch is a reality. So, when we are faced with time crunch, whether it's a day to day, teaching at your university or wherever you are, we have to prepare our lecture, and also we have to focus on research, publication, we have targets to do. So we are actually, at least I can say, even I am sometimes caught in this trap. Okay, I have prepared many, since the last 4 or 5 years, I have been giving talks on AI in academia, AI in writing, AI in etc., etc. So one solution, or you can say one strategy, is to use recycling of your slide decks, right? You already have some slide decks, you can use that. Or you can use, as a teacher, you can take some textbook and then prepare a PPT based on the textbook outlines. But then today, what we are doing is we now have another tool, that is ChatGPT, and we can use that for our teaching purposes, for preparing our lectures, etc. So, what I'm going to be talking about is, it's not just about using ChatGPT, because there are so many pros and cons. Because basically, it's not about, because I'm sure every one of you have used ChatGPT, right? Is there anyone there who has not used ChatGPT? You can raise your hand. I'm sure there is no one in our audience also who has not used ChatGPT. But the key difference, in my view, is knowing when to use ChatGPT or AI. It's a form of wisdom, not just a technical knowledge. It's a form of your wisdom, because, like most wisdom, it's also paradoxical. See, we are experienced in spotting mistakes, right? So that is as an expert. So if you already have some expertise, you can spot the mistakes, or what they call as hallucinations, of ChatGPT. But if you are not an expert, then you cannot spot them. That's what many times our students do. They think that we don't understand that, or we don't make out that they have used ChatGPT. We can easily see that. Okay. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is that when we have expertise, when we have much deeper knowledge, that is when we have to use ChatGPT, not when we don't have. Okay. Only because that is only then you can actually make the best use of the ChatGPT or any AI. So it works best for tasks when we know for ourselves, and then we can actively use them for advancing, or as an assistant. I normally say I use it as an assistant. Okay. I'll show you some examples of how I use it. And also, there is a stigma attached to using ChatGPT. I know many people say, "Oh, it has been prepared with the help of a ChatGPT." We see, we hear about many, they were caught using ChatGPT, right? So there is the stigma attached to using ChatGPT or AI, or Gen AI as it is known as. And also there are the benefits, advantages of using ChatGPT, because it minimizes many of your tasks, right? So we are caught between these two, as any layperson is, or as a teacher, or as a librarian, whoever, as a writer, researcher, etc. So the wisdom, I would say, lies in when to use and how to use. That is the key theme of my talk this morning. So for this purpose, as I said earlier, we need to shift the paradigm from using it as a tool and move towards using ChatGPT or AI as our thought partner. Okay. And for this purpose, I would say I'm going to focus on one method, what is known as the Socratic method. Okay. So the shift is not from human to machine. Don't think that when we use ChatGPT or AI, we are shifting from human to machine, but our objective should be to shift from using it as a tool to using it as a thought partner. Using it as, instead of using the ChatGPT to answer your questions, You use ChatGPT to question you, question your thoughts, or question your writing. So you understand the difference, right? Don't you ask questions to ChatGPT and get answers and use them, but use ChatGPT to question your writing or question you. Okay. So instead of using, of course, we use it as a productivity aid, but more importantly, we should use ChatGPT or AI as a critic. That is the key difference. That is the shift that I am talking about. Use ChatGPT as a critic. Ask the ChatGPT to criticize. Okay, that is what the shifting paradigm I say. So instead of asking ChatGPT, write a 500 lecture summary on AI and libraries. Okay, that is the standard way of using ChatGPT as a tool, and it will give you some fairly sensible, fairly useful answers, or even a 500-word summary. But that is not the way to use it. Your wisdom lies in you write whatever you know about, whatever you think about, let us say, the topic of AI and libraries, and put that into the chat box, and then ask ChatGPT to find what are the flaws in that, what are the weak examples that I have given, what are the blind spots that in your lecture layout. That is the method. That's what I mean by the key about using ChatGPT as a thought partner. Don't take what ChatGPT gives you, but give work to ChatGPT in such a way that you have already got some ideas. Whatever ideas you already know. All of us have some ideas. We already have some thoughts, right? Put it down. Remember that, put it down in writing. Ask ChatGPT about what it thinks about that, and ask ChatGPT about what are the logical flaws in my paper. What are the weak examples that I have given? So, what are the blind spots in my argument? And give me suggestions. That is the transition that I am suggesting or recommending, rather than asking the chat GPT to write your work or whatever schema. So, it's not about, it's about, as I said, it's about reframing. Don't ask, what can AI do for me? But instead, how can AI help me think and do better? That is the shift. How can AI help me think and do better? See, almost all experts of AI are saying, in fact, quite many are objecting to even use of the word or phrase artificial intelligence. Okay, they say it should not be artificial intelligence. It is the right word is actually computational intelligence. Anyway, let us not get into that. That's different. It is with us now. Artificial intelligence is a term that is being used, so we need to use that. But then, as I said, we need to ask, how can AI augment me? How can AI can augment human intelligence? Otherwise, if we don't do it, some of you might be familiar with that, one meme that is going about with the enhancement of AI, the native intelligence is coming down. People are getting dumber and dumber, right? So that should not happen. So instead of prompting, see, generally everybody, you probably have heard of that, right? Now it's called prompt engineering. So don't prompt, but instead make it a dialogue. Instead of just asking, explain the concept, you probe. What am I missing? Argue against this. That is how you challenge ChatGPT to challenge you. Okay? So that is the change that I am asking every one of you to follow, rather than just ask ChatGPT to give you something. Okay. So the quality of interaction, remember always, the quality of interaction depends on the quality of questions. It's important to, we already know what is important. Even when there is a lecture that is organized, people say, oh, it is a good question. Asking a good question or a smart question is more important than just, summarizing it, etc. Right? So everyone is now concerned about the impact of AI, impact of ChatGPT on education. I've just taken one screenshot from UNESCO, because UNESCO has been doing a lot of developing frameworks, preparing guidelines regarding how to use AI in education and directions. As I've been a consultant for UNESCO on a couple of projects, so I know the good work that is done by UNESCO. So in this area also, UNESCO has been doing quite I would say, significant contributions in helping all of us to understand this. Okay. So rethinking education in the digital age. This is the summary of what UNESCO has been talking about. See, it said, as I said, we cannot help not use ChatGPT or AI. It is with us. It's going to actually occupy more and more. It's going to get better and better. So that is the new frontier of innovation. So it is changing already how we learn, work, and communicate. Forget about us. I have a 7-year-old granddaughter. In fact, last year only, when she was 6, I asked her, you should write a story. And you know what she said? Ajay, I don't have to write a story. Siri will write a story for me. Right? So even a child knows that she can use Siri or ChatGPT, etc., to actually do her work. So as I said, no, you can write, but that will not be your work. First, you write what you want to say, and then ask ChatGPT to maybe refine it, improve it. That is the dialogue that we are talking about. So it is changing how we learn, work, and communicate. Okay. And more importantly, it's also, particularly for our professionals, that is library and information science professionals, the second point, that is revolutionizing knowledge access and creation. That is the major transformation that has taken place today, because we have all seen over the, at least for people of my vintage, we have seen from 1970s till now. There was a time when you would go to the library, go to the whether it is Lisa or biological abstracts or chemical abstracts, etc., to have access to knowledge. From that we moved to databases in CD-ROMs, then dialogue, that is as the service dialogue I am talking about, online. Then came Google, which disrupted everything, right? So people thought that you don't even need these databases. So you can use natural, because we were talking about learning also and teaching Boolean logic, right? How to use Boolean algebra to get good answers. So from Boolean algebra to natural language, now just prompt. You ask something, it will give you. So access to knowledge has been revolutionized, and with minimal effort on the part of the seeker of knowledge. That is the revolution that we are talking about. Please remember, there is one still major flaw or issue, that is access to knowledge that any chat GPT or large language models have is one, limited. Two, it's based on or limited by its training modules. Three, it's limited by the fact that it really doesn't have understanding. LLM or chat GPT are essentially basically synthetic text produce. They produce, like this. They don't have any idea what they are talking about. They just mix up the words. Of course, they do it very fast. That is there. And because you can see, according to UNESCO, there are about 1 billion regular AI chatbot users. 1 billion. That means 1 in 7% in this world is a regular user of the chat GPT. Okay. So this naturally is changing some of our fundamental assumptions. I mean, everybody is asking, are there going to be classrooms? Do we still need dedicated physical spaces for learning? See, we are already doing this online thing, because I remember when Academic Staff College, as the concept started in 1987 or somewhere in Mysore, I used to go and give a talk, not just for library professionals, but others also, right? So we had to go, well, it is the convenience, because this morning I said, oh, I don't have to go to Academic Staff College, sit here, etc. That convenience is there. So we don't even physical spaces probably may not be needed, right? And secondly, the role of the teacher is changing. There was a time when students would be happy when you just gave them some nice information, because information scarcity was there. They were not getting information. So naturally, a teacher was the conduit, or the channel through which information used to be transmitted. But today, the teacher's role is not even just transmitting information, because your child or your child, your own family, a child, or your student already knows probably much better than you to get the information. Okay. So traditional materials are also changing, right? So that is the disruption that we are talking about. Today, we already know about, AI writing a PhD thesis, AI writing articles, and all of that, right? And we also know that AI is winning competitions. This is not new. Remember, Watson, one of the IBM machine long back, won the chess game. That was one of the beginnings of this artificial intelligence, right? So basically, it has disrupted, and we also know that it is now defining the future, right? So the key here is all this has happened. But the question is, we need to embrace it, and how do we manage the disruption? So I said I will give you some examples of how I use ChatGPT regularly also, right? I have shown here this is what I do regularly, even when I use ChatGPT for everything. Everything meaning, for example, there are some debates that happen, right? So I don't know whether you can see it clearly, but when I ask ChatGPT, see, for example, I have written, refine. This is what I want to say. Can you refine? Or sometimes I ask it to expand. Okay. So I say what I want to say first. What I want to write, I write it. Okay. And I use ChatGPT to refine it. Why I refine? Because, I don't want to sit and, make some corrections in the everything. So I said, okay, but the thought is mine. Remember that. The idea is mine, as I have given you in this, about womenomics, something, there was some discussion in one group. I said, this is about, how number of women working has now plateaued in India. Many women are getting educated, but they are not working anymore. So anyway, that was this discussion. So the point I wanted to show is that even for a routine debate I use, but I put my ideas first. Say, I want to say this. You can refine it. Okay. Then, for example, it gives me a refined one, and I see that it has not actually captured the intent. My intent sometimes it doesn't capture. So I say, no, that is not what I meant. So then I also say, can I add this? So that is the kind of dialogue or interaction that I do every day for small things, like, as I said, for small interactions or debate on WhatsApp group, or when I am writing something also. So the point that I am trying to say is, first put your thoughts there in words. Put what you want to say. Think what you want to say, then put them in words, and then use ChatGPT, saying that you can refine it, or you can ask it, what's wrong with my example? Or you can say, I'll show you another example a little later on. It gave me one example. I said, I don't want to use that example for this. Okay. So that's what I mean by from tool to thought part. That's just one example of using ChatGPT, not just as a tool, but as a thought partner. This is just one day-to-day example. So the big idea here is, as I mentioned here earlier, I'm going to be focusing mainly on deploying the Socratic approach. I suppose everyone knows what is meant by Socratic approach. Socrates, I will come to that, famous philosopher who developed this idea for teaching purposes only, that it is called the Socratic method. Okay. So the Socratic method, I'll come to that. The Socratic turn basically means ask, probe, clarify, challenge, and reflect. These are the steps that we need to follow while using AI or ChatGPT. First, ask a question, then probe further. Then you clarify. I said, no, this is not what I meant. Is that what you mean by that? Then you challenge ChatGPT. I think sometimes it is wrong also, and we know that it is wrong. I have had many examples, simple examples, and sometimes not so simple examples of ChatGPT getting it wrong. Let me give you an example. Harinarana introduced me saying that I do the InfoFire podcast series, wherein I interview eminent personalities in IT and various other information related areas. So I did a interview of Narayan Murthy, I think last year or 2 years back. Okay. So naturally, I use every method. I know Narayan Murthy, I have his bio, and I take that and I ask ChatGPT, to give me, because I always want to know if I missed something, right, to introduce Narayan Murthy. So I said, give me some bio of Narayan Murthy. Can you believe it? It said Narayan Murthy is the founder and CEO of TCS. I'm not joking. I'm not making it up. This is what ChatGPT said 2 years back. So like that, there will be mistakes. Remember, factual errors, as I call it. And there are like that errors, many more, okay? And then just recently, I was writing something for my InfoFire, and one Nobel laureate, I said, Nobel laureate Mark Wire says this. I had written and asked ChatGPT to, refine it. And then ChatGPT said, Mark Wire has not won the Nobel laureate. I said, no, he has won. Because I had taken it from the Nobel, Nobel.org website, and I knew that he was a Nobel winning economist. So I said, no, double check. I gave the link to ChatGPT. The point I'm trying to is clarify, challenge, and then finally we need to reflect also. So that is what is important. That is what is known as the Socratic turn. Not just ask question or explain something and take whatever it gives. Okay. So it basically asks AI to teach you. First, ask it to make you think. That should be our goal. I use this, I think, therefore I am. It is a famous quote by another philosopher, René Descartes. Of course, he wrote it in French, cogito ergo sum, because he used it. This is very important in the context of, again, AI, because today they're saying, if you're not thinking, do you exist? I think, therefore I am. Descartes used this model to say that we exist. That is, human beings are beings, we exist. So I think, therefore I am. So that's a very well-known quote, okay, saying that we use regularly. So we need to use ChatGPT or AI to make us think more, okay? And Plato, for example, I remember earlier I said the kind of questions that you ask is important. So Plato said the right question is usually more important than the right answer. So with ChatGPT, it's important that you ask the right question. Okay. So right question is more important than the right answer. Voltaire, famous, Voltaire is his pen name. It's easier to judge a person's mind by their questions rather than answers. So your questions actually depict your mind better than the answers that you give. So I'm giving you these quotes just to highlight the importance of thinking, importance of your questions. Questions are important than just the answer, okay? So now we move on to the Socratic method, okay? Now, this is what I have got it from, because I know, of course, I know what is Socratic method. I asked, because I wanted to use Socratic method, and I asked ChatGPT to give me something. I said, explain Socratic method. So this is what it has given me. And I know what it is, since I know it's a cooperative, argumentative dialogue. So this part, I have taken it essentially as given by ChatGPT. Why? Because I know it is correct. I know who is Socrates. Socrates is a philosopher. He developed this method known as the Socratic approach or Socratic questioning, etc. They use different things, either Socratic approach or Socratic method or Socratic method of questioning. That is, you start with questioning. So a teacher doesn't tell something, or anybody, they start with a question. So that's why, many teachers you might have observed, they start a lecture with a question, because that's also one of the part of the Socratic method. So it is cooperative, argumentative dialogue. So you have a dialogue. In fact, Socrates had with his teacher, Plato. Okay. So this probes the conversation partner on a topic using questions and clarifications until the partner is pressed to come to a conclusion on their own. Why this is used? So you let the student come to a conclusion on his or her own rather than you give the conclusion. That is why the Socratic method is considered to be one of the good methods in teaching. Okay. So instead of lecturing, a teacher or a leader use structured sequential targeted questions to help uncover the underlying assumptions, logical flaws, and deeper proof. That is what is known as the Socratic method. So my take here is that we should be adopting the Socratic method even while using ChatGPT or any AI. Okay. So the main principles of Socratic approach is it is disciplined questioning, not simply ask some question at random. It should be a structured, disciplined questioning. And then basically the idea is to test your assumptions. Okay. Basically, as you know, philosophy, one of the important parts of philosophy is logic. As you know, logical thinking or reasoning is very important, and we need to hone our logical thinking or logical reasoning. That's why to examine the arguments, what are the flaws that are there in the argument? These are the methods that are used in Socratic method or Socratic approach. And then I trying to identify inconsistencies. Okay, if there are inconsistencies or gaps in your logic, that is also, it can be. So together, that's why it's called cooperative. Why? Because the teacher as well as the student, ChatGPT as well as you will learn together, right? So when I ask some question, I said, you are wrong. ChatGPT is, oh, sorry, oh, you are good. You are saying correctly, I went wrong, something and all it will say. And many times when I'm writing some article, I say, I want to use this in my argument. Then ChatGPT tells you, oh, I don't know how I forgot to introduce that in the argument. So it is also learning. So that is the method, what is known as the Socratic method. So Socratic method is very important because it replaces passive learning with active inquiry. These are the pluses, or you can say advantages or benefits of using the Socratic method in any teaching. This is not just for ChatGPT, but for any teaching. So if you are teaching your child or your student, whoever it is, you can adapt a little bit. I mean, I'm not saying that, the entire simplified guidelines can be followed, but still you can use this method, ask a question, right? Rather than just giving the answer. So you can test your beliefs, hidden flaws in our argument, etc. See, for example, it's what is known as, there is a 5-step Socratic framework. So first step is establish the thesis. Okay. I've just given one example. My thesis, an expert is always right, let us say. We say experts, we take the experts, even if you assume ChatGPT is an expert, right? You think that it is always right. An authority possessing elite training, up-to-date knowledge, and a principled framework is infallible. That is my thesis, let us say, right? Now, step 2, probe this thesis. Introduce historical or domain paradigms. So if somebody says to me, oh, you have to accept that. Let me introduce a controversial topic here. Current controversial topic in India. There was this great, I would say, controversy regarding the use of cow urine as a therapeutic thing, right, for treatment. All of you are familiar. So somebody say, oh, he's the director of IIT Madras. That means what? He's an expert, right? Now you have to probe that. How do I probe that? First thing I said is, he is probably an expert in computer science, but he's talking about cow urine as a treatment for various things. He's not an expert in cow urine or biochemistry or medical sciences or life sciences, correct? So that is probing. You take a historical domain or a paradigm and then say how Kamakoti could be talking as an expert on cow urine. You understand my way of... So that's how you have to question. Correct. He is an authority in maybe computer science. He has developed this. I agree. I'm not now going to question that. What I'm questioning is, supposing, let us say, somebody considers me as an authority on library information science. Can I go and talk about cow urine? No. My expertise, even there, is limited to a small area within library information science. Unless I have done research on cow urine, I cannot be taught. So the point here is, introduce, that is, probe the thesis. If somebody says Oh, Kamakoti, he's a director of IIT, he brought so much. I mean, that is the argument I have seen, debates that I have seen, right? So he has said all this, so we should accept that as truth. No, I will not accept. Why? As I said, probe. So I'll give you another example here. This is what I said. I changed the example because I am familiar with this case. I think all of you are familiar. We all know that, I mean, not just an expert, he's a legendary figure. Albert Einstein is a legendary figure, right? He was a rock star of physics, correct? But I suppose, I don't know whether all of you know that he opposed Niels Bohr's Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics because he rejected the idea that nature is fundamentally probabilistic, random, and incomplete. That was the thesis of Bohr. That is, nature is probabilistic, random, and incomplete. Can you believe that? Those days, in the 1920s, Albert Einstein did not accept that. Right? This is one classic example, despite all the expertise that he had. In fact, Einstein, that's the thing here. In a 1905 relativity theory, special relativity, he established this. But he had a certain view and he did not accept Niels Bohr's probabilistic view. Who was correct here? Who is proved correct? I suppose all of you know that, right? Einstein was proved wrong. Niels Bohr was proved right. That is what is, later on also, everything has proved. So this is the dialogue that we are talking about. It's not just accepting something as true or correct just because it is coming from. They had, that dialogue has become very famous. The most important debate in history of quantum theory. The dialogue between Einstein and Niels Bohr. And Niels Bohr, if you have watched that famous movie about 2 years back, that was Oppenheimer. If you have not watched, you watch it. That even though it's about the atomic bomb and Oppenheimer, you will see Einstein and Bohr there also. Of course, it's fictionalized, but you will understand that. The point I'm trying to hear is this is the dialogue we are talking about. So if this could happen some 100 years back between two great physicists, can you take ChatGPT as whatever it spins out as the truth? No, we have to question it. Okay. So that is why, in fact, some of you might have heard of this famous quote by Einstein. He said, God does not play dice with the universe because probability means it's playing dice, right? He said he does not play dice. So step 4 in the 5-step framework is refine the thesis. Okay, now I have probed it. Now I have questioned it and then I refine the thesis. Okay, an expert is correct relative to the best available evidence of their era, but remains bounded by the current human discovery. So no expert is infallible. No expert is an expert across time. Across time, see, if somebody said 200 years back, whether it is, Indian medicine or any medicine, that cannot be accepted as truth today because at that time they were correct because they were bounded by the current knowledge that was available, right? So that is why we always say we have to question everything and it keeps changing. And that is the beauty of science. Beauty of science is that it is open. It accepts new evidences. So this is the step, refine the thesis. Okay, that is, don't say that experts' words are always correct. Experts are infallible. No, experts are not infallible. Experts are also prone to errors. Experts are also bounded by the knowledge that they have, or even sometimes the biases that they have. Okay, so that's the Socratic method. The paradigm shift is that don't focus on memorization, but interactive validation. Remember, interactive validation. The ultimate goal of a team or student is to acquire logical tools. That is more important than passing on information. So logical tools, question assumptions. How can you assume certain things? What are your assumptions? How did you arrive at this thesis, right? What are my assumptions? Okay, somebody is a IIT director, somebody has a PhD in computer science, somebody has published papers. My question was, has he published papers in cow urine? No, right? So then it ends. So basically, we are looking at it as an intellectual sparring partner. Remember that. That is ChatGPT. Using Socratic method, we use it as an intellectual sparring partner. So you enter a classroom prepared, that is, as a teacher, we need to go with the assumption that students also know something different, something more. In fact, let me also share a personal story. I always used to encourage my students, probably Hari Narayana will exemplify that, if you have questions, please ask questions. And then I would listen to the question. In fact, one of my early batch student, who was also, quite senior to me by age as well as otherwise, she asked me, why do you pay attention to the student's question? I said, no, I do not make an assumption that I know better and the student doesn't know. My assumption is either students may not know better, but student brings a different perspective. Because the assumption is if you have a question, there is some reasoning behind that question. So I want to understand the reasoning behind that question. The point I am trying to say is, in all aspects, we have to use ChatGPT or a student or any other person with whom you are debating as an intellectual sparring partner. So Einstein about this is this is what happened. The difference, okay? Einstein was a revolutionary about the structure of physics, but remained a realist about the nature of reality. This is what I got from the ChatGPT interaction with this question. That's what I said. With this, I asked ChatGPT, give me this. Why did he assume this? So finally, I got this answer. Not that Einstein was wrong, it's more about he was looking at it from the point of view of the structure of physics, but not in the nature of reality, whereas Bohr was looking at it from the nature of reality. So reality is always probabilistic, reality is random, that's what he said, which is correct, right? So that's the point. So you discover something new always. So Socratic preparation is, do not explain this topic to me, but act as a Socratic interlocutor. Okay, these are the method. Do not give me the answer unless I ask. You have to use this approach with ChatGPT. So I use ChatGPT primarily for example, one way is to use it as a designer. First, you ask something and it will give you. It can be used as a case builder. It can be used for generating questions. It can also be used for misconception hunter. Remember that. That's what I'm trying to tell you, people, that it can be used as what are the misconceptions in your argument or your thesis, right? So basically, I'm going to now pause for a minute and tell you this AI does not replace a teacher. It amplifies impact, insight, and imagination. That is how we should approach the AI in teaching and research. But remember, teacher has to remain the teacher. AI can give you various, as I said, it helps you, it refines your method, it refines your thinking, but still it can only refine. The idea has to come from you. And only I can give that is, I as a teacher, I can give the context. ChatGPT doesn't have the context in which I'm asking that question, the context in which I'm asking for some answers also. So context is with me as a teacher, context with you as a teacher. The judgment has to be ours, and disciplinary expertise is ours, and empathy, the human empathy factor is ours. Remember that. Always, that is important for us to remember whenever you are using any AI, including ChatGPT. That is the role of human beings. That's why, in AI, experts always say human in the loop. You must always have human in the loop. Without that, it will not work. It will be catastrophic, in fact. So AI expands what is possible. That's why I ask ChatGPT to refine it, expand this, add some more example, and I give another example and ask ChatGPT to say which is better and why is it better. I give my examples and it gives me some examples and then say, okay, which is better? And it has to tell me why it is better. Okay. See, for example, I use ChatGPT to ask questions to my interviews, right, for the info file. But what I do is first I give some questions and ask ChatGPT to give some questions, and I combine them and ask the ChatGPT to choose any 10 of them and tell me why which is better, why I should not use the other one. That's the intellectual sparring partner as I'm talking about. Use it as a brainstormer. Okay, that's the idea here. So the classroom changes, not as earlier, as I said earlier, you just deliver the content. No, you use AI for interaction, and then it can flow both ways. Even the student should be allowed to use ChatGPT. The teacher can be used, also be allowed to use ChatGPT as I keep saying, intellectual sparring partner, as a dialogue, as a conversation. That is important for us to remember that we need to be doing this. So what is the big idea here? Generate possibilities, patterns, alternatives, right? Now, what we can do is AI should help students to explain. More importantly, we should get AI to make students reason, not just explanation, not give some summary, right? It should reason, not just generate possibilities, but judge possibilities. That's why I said I ask it to generate some questions, I give some questions, and then ask ChatGPT to say why this is better. Judge. I am the final judge, of course. But still, I will ask it to offer counter arguments, and I defend my argument, right? Formulate question. So these are the ways the boundary map has to be drawn. See, what this slide I'm trying to tell you here in this slide is that we need to have some boundaries. The boundaries are that, this is what I want to do with ChatGPT. This is how I am going to actually use ChatGPT. And then finally, I am the one who decides, who judges, who revises, and decide which question to ask or which paragraph to include or exclude, etc. So that independence of you, of the human being, has to be always maintained. Okay. So I use ChatGPT currently, as I said, as my teaching assistant. Instead of asking somebody something, some student or somebody to help you with some, our teachers always use their PhD students or others to help them with some task. But again, remember, it is your final analysis, your final work that matters, right? So we have to use ChatGPT primarily in this respect as an assistant. Because we all know, I can tell you as a teacher, I have been a teacher for 50 years now. I can tell you as a teacher, students think that they are smarter. They can outwit you. Particularly, they think that you are old, so you don't know. Everybody thinks that no, they are smarter, right? So they try to, because I will tell you one example. This is just as a example. So for one of my PhD students, I would make, those days still, pen and paper, make this, okay, this is correct, make these corrections, etc. That PhD student thought that, I don't have that good memory. So would remove those questions and bring the same thing back without making changes. I said, I had asked you these questions. I said, you have to reframe this. You have to revise this. Why you have not done it? Because they think that, well, you are getting old, so or you are busy, etc. You may not actually spot that. The point I'm trying to say here is you have to be on top of, when students are working or when somebody is actually assisting you in your writing paper. I give my some work to my former PhD students even today also. Well, I write some papers and then say, oh, this has to be tested. Can you test and send it back to me? They do it, not that they don't do it. But then I still have to go over it and see what the problems are. So say, or what are the missing things, etc. Then I say, no, I sent you this data, but I see that this is not adding up. The data is not adding up. I told one of my former PhD students before writing a article, that too, this was an article that we got published in, Journal of the Society for Information Science and Technology, which is one of the top tier journals, right? So I have to be extra careful. So I was extra careful, double checked everything, and I said, no, the data doesn't add up. The point I'm trying to say is the same thing happens with ChatGPT or AI also. AI gets it wrong, and we have to be on top of it. Okay. So basically, as I already said, not just as a teaching assistant, but brainstorming part. Ask questions and you come up with some ideas and then ask. Okay. So that is how we should be looking at ChatGPT. Now, at this point, before going further into my talk, I would like to pause for a minute and ask you people if you have any questions, instead of going till the end and then leaving for question. Is it allowed in your platform now?
Yes,
Ma'am,
ma'am,
good
we are
morning,
allowed,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Pavmavati, ma'am.
Okay, one by one.
Am I audible, ma'am? Ma'am, am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Ma'am, actually, while writing articles, if we are using the AI, it is showing that AI plagiarism, ma'am. That journal people, they are saying that it is showing the AI plagiarism. So we could not, accept your papers like that. But I have used only for the grammar correction. That
Correct.
AI. Perplexity I have used, but they said like this, how do I overcome, ma'am? For these problems, how do I overcome this?
Yeah, see, there is a issue there because AI has a particular language. Its use of terms, etc. You might have read articles on that, It uses what I call as the superlatives more, not the normal words. So what I would say is put your words. Use it only for grammar. First, that's what I said. I'm not saying you did not put, but don't accept all the words that it gives you because it's your writing, right? So it's your writing, even if it gives you, it seems a better word than what you have used. See, earlier also, I'll just give you another example. I have been using thesaurus for since a long time, 50 years, right? So I said, okay, I want to write this word, but I think there is a better word for it, correct? And then we look up we used to look up those days a thesaurus and say, oh, instead of saying this, let me use this word. So if you use that using our own prompt, it's different. But when you put it for chat GPT, what it does is uses the same old words. We can easily make out, right? So you have to avoid that or change it also. You understand what I'm trying to say? You make some changes. Don't
Yes.
take the final version as given by ChatGPT. You make corrections again on
Yes,
top
ma'am.
of it, right? And
Yes,
then
ma'am.
also many a times, you may have to use as a combination. I understand, we still, English is not our native language, so we are non-native speakers of English, so we are a little worried about the language part. But I would say these days, even if there are one or two errors in English or grammar, it is okay. People are now have moved to this level where they don't want to see perfect English or bombastic words. Use normal words that we use. I agree. Even forget about ChatGPT. Even plagiarism check. No, after all, it is still see. They are also using ChatGPT or any other device to check whether you have used. I have seen myself for this. What is that? Plagiarism. Turnitin, for example, right? So Turnitin, the paper that I was talking about, because we were submitting to JSS, I put it in that. It said 30% something. Then I looked at what are it is showing my own papers as plagiarism. You get my point? So I cite my own paper, it is my
Yes, ma'am.
writing, and out of that 30%, again 25% is my writing. So how can it be 30% plagiarism? So there are also machines, ChatGPT, etc., right? So they also get it wrong. So the method here is don't depend too much on that. Similarly, for example, examples that you give. The examples have to be yours. Don't take the examples given by ChatGPT. So take your own live examples and use ChatGPT to refine it. That's all. And again, be cautious about the language. I agree. I understand your point because sometimes, it happens to all of us. In fact, I mean, not in this sense. Somewhere I read about, use of, I don't know whether M dash, what is M dash, right? That long dash that we use, that's called M dash. I believe ChatGPT uses M dash more, but somehow I always liked M dash and I've been using M dash since 30, 40 years. So if my writing has more M dash and ChatGPT recognizes it as generated by ChatGPT, there is a problem. So we need to, what I call a sidestep it or circumvent it by using some tricks or some other methods. Okay, don't use the examples given by, let us say, ChatGPT. As I told you, for example, when I asked for some examples about Socratic method, it gave some other example of physics teacher. But since I knew about Einstein and Bohr thing, so I said, no, I want to use this. And then, of course, it gave me that, nice image. But the example is mine. It is my own. My own in the sense I knew about it, I had read about it, and I know quantum physics because I have used it in my own thesis also, because I talk about everything being relative. Any information, everything is being relative. So I have used this deterministic method, etc. Anyway, the point I'm saying is, since I knew, I said use this example and not that example. Still, it could be more useful in the sense of I did not create, of course, even this one, I did not create this image. I asked ChatGPT to create an image. I gave brainstorming session of that partner, and it gave me another, a Western looking girl. I said, no, I want an Indian looking girl because I'm giving to an Indian. Of course, it gave me this. I mean, if I had time, I would have said, no, I don't want this also because this was typical, it has that notion of an Indian girl and it gives with all that. I said, it's okay. I thought I'm going to explain to you that also. First, I got for this image, I asked it to create an image, but the text I said, give this text. Okay. It created the image. First, there was a, Western looking girl. Then I said, change the girl to an Indian looking one because my audience is Indian. It gave me this. I said, forget it. It's okay. But if I want to, I can go on saying that change this, younger, older, whatever, change the dress. All that it can do. It can do it very fast, right? We have to acknowledge that. It can do it fast. But the point I'm saying is use it to assist you. Not so much as its idea, but your idea, actually. Depending on you. Yeah, I understand your question. Any other question? Yes. Only one more question, then I move on.
Ma'am, good morning, ma'am. This is Selvaraj, ma'am.
Yes, Selvaraj, tell me. How are you
Ma'am,
today?
today morning I tried, ma'am. Actually, I have a content, but I do not have the references.
Okay.
But I asked the references according to ABS style. I also got the answer. But again, I asked, is it correct? Is this reference is relevant or not? Again, he has listed, ma'am. But I identified two of the references not relevant to my content. But I asked the ChatGPT to replace it.
Yeah.
But finally, I got the answer. Is this correct, ma'am?
Correct. And also independently double check the reference.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I mean, independently means don't go to ChatGPT.
Yes, ma'am.
Go to some other usual scholarly, even Google Scholar or something like that, and then check the reference. That's what I'm saying. In fact, GPT, according to me, is helping us, but also increasing our workload. Right? So we have to double check it, but it is useful. I'm not saying that it is not useful. Earlier I would have just simply given a slide with just text like this, right? Today we give some, nice graphics. But then the
I
text
also
has,
tried, ma'am.
yeah.
I
So
also
that's all
tried.
we do. But as my brainstorming partner is my idea, correct? That should be this is what I said. It should be done that all of so your approach is correct. That's why I said as a partner.
Yes, ma'am.
Ask them, then double check it. There should be no I would say we need not be hesitant about using ChatGPT, but we have to be vigilant about using ChatGPT. That would be my advice. Don't be hesitant, but be vigilant.
Thank you,
Keep
madam.
double
Very kind of
checking.
you, ma'am.
Yeah. Keep double checking, and then it certainly, reduces our work. And as she was saying, I mean, even I use it not because it's difficult to write a sentence, but it is easier that rather than worrying about spell. See, I always say this. Earlier, we used to use dictionaries and thesaurus to double check our spelling. Then came, for example, in Word itself, you have the spell check. Then came Grammarly. I have bought with my own money Grammarly, paid a subscription and used it Grammarly. Now I'm saving on that, not using Grammarly, because anyway, even ChatGPT can help me. But remember, as I said, the tone of ChatGPT is very similar. So we need to have our voice there, the way we want to say. So I keep telling, no, I want it this way rather than this way. Only when it changes, I say, no, I want it this way, only fix the grammar. You can say fix the grammar. When you don't want it to change the tone, just say fix the grammar. I use that, fix the grammar only, I say. Otherwise, it will change the words. So that is one way you can, reduce this sort of, I would say, the allegation that it is ChatGPT generated. Use it just like Grammarly, fix the grammar. Sometimes I use it, fix the grammar only. Otherwise, it will add so many other things, bombastic words. I don't want it. I want it to be my words, right? So I will say, no, don't do that. So, as I said, no, we need to navigate all of these things, right? To be useful, depending on the kind of, like, for example, for a talk like this, I don't have to worry too much. But if I'm writing a paper, I have to be more vigilant, right? So all of that is important. Okay,
Thank
shall
you,
we
ma'am.
move
Very
on?
kind of you, ma'am.
Sir, you
Good
have a
morning, ma'am.
question?
That is, ma'am, this one
Yeah.
ethical. This one ethical we have collected from reference from ChatGPT. That is unethical. That is we have collected source means that source based we have a reference. Otherwise we have the academic credibility is damaged.
See, there is this ethical thing in my next talk, but still, anyway, I'll answer. The ethical thing will be if you are not read that article. See, after all, when we use any database, that will throw up the article. That's how we have been finding articles, right? When you go to a library catalog, when I go to a library shelf also, I do not know all the books that are there. I go to a shelf because I want to check, or even when I go to a bookstore, I want to do that, right? That doesn't mean that, it's unethical. I go to a shelf and then I say, okay, this book, etc. I take, correct? That's not, but if I don't read it and cite it, then that is unethical. I have to read it, at least skim it. You know what I mean, skimming it, right? So it's not like, you have to read the entire from first line to the last line. At least I have to have a sense of what is it written. Because many times, no, the entire, let's say if it is a 10-page article, we may read the 10 pages, not that we will not read, but we won't pay equal attention to each and every sentence, right? So we have to read that article, we have to understand what that article is saying, and then cite. So the ethics, I would say, is not in taking a reference given by ChatGPT, but not reading it and taking it. That's the ethics come. You have to read that article, right? That is not about ChatGPT. I would say even before ChatGPT, that is the ethics. So you read it, as I keep saying, it may not be the entire thing, but still we have to read it. For example, I wanted to, I think it's there afterwards. Since yesterday, I'm thinking about what to say for this. So everywhere, see, there is in yesterday's Hindu magazine, there was this and the lines I won't cross. Okay, can you see this here? Okay, I've used that in my slide, but I have to read it also, not just go by the title, correct? So the author says where won't cross the line about using the AI. I've not given the reference there. I've just given a screenshot, I think, there in my slide. Okay. So the point I'm trying is, well, this is something that I saw, and I'm going to give, I'm using that in my talk, but then before I use that, I have to read it also. Correct? I have to read it and then cite it. It was not given by ChatGPT. That's a different thing. Even if ChatGPT gives me, that's the method that we have to follow. So ChatGPT, any other question, please? Now, since we are already moving to this writing assistant thing, see, when you ask it to write, you can ask the ChatGPT, what am I missing? What is missing in my article? Don't just use it to refine it or, fix your grammar. What am I missing? You ask it. Well, you try asking that question to ChatGPT. Let me know what is missing here. Then ask for what are the alternatives. And then ask, what would you think that the reviewer will say? But remember one thing, ChatGPT is always nice also. It is not very critical. I don't know. I find it that it is not very critical. It's like, it will praise you. Oh, you've done very well. So don't go by that. Okay. It's like that typical, you say, oh, you are written very well. You have a very good point. All of that it will say because it wants you to use it now. Right? So be careful about the prices that you get from ChatGPT. So ask it. Right? What do you think a reviewer would point out here? And then ask it, because that's what you are asking it to give me the evidence. In order to come to this is my inference. What evidences can I have in order to come to this? Okay. So those are the ways in which that's what I meant by changing the paradigm. Ways in which you use ChatGPT differently, approach is different. That's why I stressed on the Socratic approach, asking ChatGPT questions rather than answers only. Okay. So using it as a writing assistant. 4 roles, that is, I use my research workflow, 4 roles. One is brainstormer. I'm thinking that this hypothesis or this thesis I have. What do you think? What do you think of my hypothesis? It will give you its own views. Then, I suppose everybody knows what is known as the devil's advocate. I say, when you ask many questions, you are becoming a devil's advocate, just to try and see what is wrong with the argument. So you ask ChatGPT to become your devil's advocate. That is finding holes in your argument. It has to ask it to find holes in your argument. What is wrong with this? Do you think that just if you say, do you think it's correct? It will say yes. Ask it, find what is wrong in my assumption. Okay. Then similarly, when you give a draft also, that's what we said, right? You are saying that you are using it as but make it a critical reader, not just giving you answers. So these are the changes that we need to adapt while using ChatGPT for writing purposes. Okay. Now, literature review, everybody, I think that's why I did not go into these things too much details. Everybody knows how everybody uses this literature survey, right? You ask ChatGPT to give you references, as you were saying. And usually everybody says, summarize these papers. It will summarize, correct? But instead, go to the next step. You ask it, where do these authors disagree? Where do they agree, right? That's the dialogue, that's the conversation that I am talking about. What are the assumptions that these different authors share? Are there any theoretical tensions between this paper and that paper? Or they are converging in their assumptions? Are they converging or diverging in their theoretical frameworks? Can you find some gaps in their argument? Like that you have to question. That's why I stressed on the right questions. If you ask questions and more like use it like a partner, then you get better out of the ChatGPT, even for literature survey. See, for example, I mean, not for a scholarly article also. I'm just giving you one example, which I normally use. I share some interesting articles, etc. Let us say on these WhatsApp groups. Right? I'm part of different, debate groups, right? Sort of. So before I share, I don't ask ChatGPT to just give me a summary or whatever of that. I said I want to share this article along these introductory lines. I write my lines. Say this article highlights this, etc., etc. I write what I want to because I have read it and I write it, and then ask ChatGPT to refine it or expand it. I mean, this is for regular, chats that we have. The point I'm saying is going it to the next level. So always, in fact, this I would say not only for, that's one thing. Even with my own children, when they were writing or something, when they would ask me my assistance, I would say, first you write and bring it to me, then I will correct it. I won't write it for you. You write, bring it, then I correct, then you go back like this. In fact, just to give an example, I have naturally, we help our children writing. My son was applying to universities in the US, so you have to write this SOP. I said, first, it's your idea, it's your application. You have to write first because I don't know what you are thinking. So you write first. Of course, he would write and then give it to me. Then I would make correction and then send it to him. Then he would go through it. I mean, he was in Bangalore and I was here. And then we would, so that kind of a dialogue has to happen even with ChatGPT. That's the point I'm taking. Anybody, whoever it is, whether it's your children, students, or colleague, whatever, it has to be an interaction, validation. Validation has to happen. That's why I have given in the very beginning interactive validation. Then we have to come to that conclusion. Okay, you're saying this, I am saying this, okay, we will come to this. In fact, me and my son used to have actually arguments, too many arguments. He would say, no, I don't want to use your word. I think I like my word. Then I would say, no, your word is not right. My word is better, etc. So we would have argument, come to a conclusion, right? So that debate has to happen, whether you are talking about individuals or with. That's why I said if somebody says, everything is right, then I say either they have not read what I have sent it, they don't want to do anything, they say, okay, it is fine. Right? No, that's not the way. Whether, the same thing, rules are the same, right? Whether you're dealing with machines or people. It goes to a different level. They are doing it faster, that's all. So don't ask the ChatGPT to summarize. You say, summarize this along these lines. Then you see the difference, for example. Or you give your summary and then ask it to give its summary and then ask it to compare and then say where the differences are, why the differences are, etc. That is how you have to use ChatGPT. Okay, again, go back to the thing, that's why I said thought partner. Okay. That's why you have to give ChatGPT different intellectual tasks. You ask it to become a skeptic. Why might arguments be wrong? It should be, sorry, it's not might, why my arguments be wrong? Why my arguments be wrong? Why might it be wrong? You ask that. Which frameworks could explain? You ask it, what can explain this particular thing? What a good reviewer would object to? What are the weaknesses in my research design? You give a research design first, right? Don't ask, because usually everybody does. I want to do this project, give me a research design. No, you think. Thinking is important. Come up with a research design. Use ChatGPT to help you to refine it, expand it, make it better. Thinking better, doing better should be our object. It should help you to think better and do things better. So I would say you have to give not just don't make ChatGPT lazy. Simply it will throw some results. Make ChatGPT also to think. Think more, because if you give more tasks, you can see that thinking, it says, right? It will be thinking more, longer. Because you are asking, you are giving it a more, I would say, challenging intellectual tasks, right? That's important. See, this is the critical problem these days. I mean, whatever we do, still, there is this paradox of we are offloading our cognitive tasks. That is a risk that we have to be wary of and try and avoid. It's very simple. We are all tempted, instead of thinking too much, we say, okay, let ChatGPT do it for me, right? But remember, over time, individually, we are losing our capabilities. Collectively, as a society, remember ChatGPT, where is it getting its intelligence? It's getting its intelligence based on all the knowledge that human race has written all these centuries. It is basing its knowledge, it's recognizing the pattern and doing it. Now, if every text is synthetic text, that is ChatGPT produced text, that means there is no original text, right? So that means over time, ChatGPT will also become dumb. We also become dumb because we are not thinking and we are using the same synthetic text, putting it back. So 10 years down the line, there is no original thinking that the ChatGPT is using. So that is the danger, that is the risk. Like many things, no? Like many things in the sense, let me just take a very simple example. See, just because we have now cars or other vehicles, right? Walking has become more, common and fashionable. Why? Because we know that we have to exercise our muscles, our limbs. If you don't exercise it, so what we earlier, the change is this. Earlier, children would go walk to the school. Earlier, we would walk to work, etc. Earlier, I mean at least 50 years back, right? At least I have walked to school. And in fact, my children still say, oh, you made us walk to school for some years. I said, yes, because I knew that it is going to be good for you, right? So, but then these days we don't do. Even I don't do it. Why? Because, the sidewalks, no, you can't walk these days, even in Mysore. So that's why I take a car only. But what do we do? How do we keep our body in fitness? Either you go to gym, or I don't go to gym, I just walk all the time and be active, right? So why I'm taking that analogy is the same analogy holds good for using AI. We can't allow our intelligence to be dull or become dumb. We have to be using it. We have to be one step up ahead. And that's why I keep going back to that. Challenge ChatGPT, challenge yourself. Come up with a better word, better argument, how to make it better. That should be the approach, right? In fact, I mean, it is normal for people to say that, why are you spending so much time on some WhatsApp group discussion? I said, it keeps my cognition, my cognitive ability, fitness. That is the reason I use, not that we are getting anything. It's not a publication. So we keep exercising, right? So that is how, remember that we need to make our brains or our cognition, our physical fitness, all that has to be exercised. So how do you exercise it? Not by offloading all your tasks to ChatGPT. It can make you productive, yes. We should write more because it's easier to write. But that doesn't mean that you are not thinking yourself. You are not putting your ideas, okay? You use it to make it better, make you think better. That should be the, I would say, the approach. And that is the paradox here today. And we need to get out of this, remember, consciously, individuals and as a society. So that's why, as I was telling you, even in education or in teaching, etc., everywhere is now coming up with new methods, new method of testing. See, earlier, writing was a one important method of testing students, right? Today, they don't do that anymore. I mean, it's there, but it's more about, that's why, let's say, interview or oral examinations are also becoming more popular. Why? That's when you test it, right? So like that, we have to come up with new methods to keep our cognition, our cognitive abilities, intellectual abilities, as well as our physical abilities in a fit form. Okay. So follow the simple rule that using ChatGPT, what possibilities am I missing? Expand it. Oppose it. Say no, you argue. Ask ChatGPT to argue against you. Then, ask ChatGPT or you yourself say, okay, how about this? Do you think that I can connect this thread of idea to the other thread of idea? What do you think of it? What ideas are related, right? Then iterative. You have to be careful that you iterate it, not just stop at one level, right? So my final, I would say, summarizing everything is, important thing is, as I highlighted, the Socratic method is very useful. Not only, I mean, it's been there since ages. So not only olden days, but even today, while we are learning or using or interacting ChatGPT or any AI, make it better, make ourselves better. That way you are helping ChatGPT to also to improve, you are helping yourself also to improve. So expand, oppose. In fact, one of my favorite things, that's why I always say dissent is a sign of progress. If everybody agrees with you, that is not progress, right? If everybody says, oh, what you are saying is correct, everybody says correct, then there is no progress. Somebody has to say, no, it is not correct. So if somebody tells me what I'm saying is not correct, then I come up with to prove my point. Let me give you another personal example in the sense of, when I started teaching in 1976, I can tell you one thing, the difference is that those days, the first batch of students, maybe because I was also young, or maybe they thought that she's young, let me question her, right? They would, after the class also, they would come and ask questions in the sense, question my argument. For I'll give you an example. In library science, I was teaching classification. Of course, I read it in some book or something. Then I said, classification is omnipresent. Okay. Then, that student is no longer there. He passed away. One Sundar Singh, he said, Madam, you said classification is omnipresent. Give me some examples of how classification is omnipresent. Right? Taking one textbook sentence and saying it is one thing. But if a student asks you, you should be having some examples, right? So he would question me, that is interrogation. Interrogate, okay, I gave him some examples. Everywhere, nature itself is so organized. In fact, I gave him one, order is heaven's first law. There is a statement. Order is heaven's first law. So you will see orderliness, the cosmos. It's so well organized, right? If you look at the planetary system, it is organized. It's not random in that sense, correct? So like that, I said, why it is omnipresent? Classification is omnipresent because order is everywhere. Order is heaven's law. So the point why I gave this example is I thoroughly enjoyed, and I feel I became a better teacher because of my first batch of students were asking so many questions.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is break time, ma'am.
Time is it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's why I've come to the end anyway. Okay, so don't think instead of me principle to do this. Okay, so the feedback loop is important. As I was telling you, you have to have an idea yourself first. You use ChatGPT for interrogation, refine it, ask for evidence, and then again go back to reiterate. Okay, that is important. So it's a new, I would call it as new division of intellectual labor. Our intellectual, the goal is not human versus AI, but it is a human plus AI, intelligently designed. That's why some people use the word augmented intelligence. Okay, that is how I would put it as. So AI literacy is not about how to use ChatGPT, but it is knowing when to ask, what to ask, how to challenge, when not to trust, when to stop. Okay, that is the AI literacy that we are talking, and that is what is known as epistemic literacy. Okay, as I said, I will show you this article that I read. At 55, the writer uses artificial. This is just one example of yesterday's newspaper. If you want, you can read that in, it's available online also. Hindu, what one writer says, how you use it. Just one example. I thought I would end with this example, which I read yesterday, as how you can use it for writing purposes. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much. I don't know if there is time for questions. I'm ready for questions.
And thank you, ma'am. Again, joining 11:45, ma'am.
Okay. I will start at 11:45. I will break now.
Ah, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.